Almanac is a production of Twin Cities PBS for the stations of Minnesota Public Television Association.
We are live, and it's called Almanac. Coming up, a big debate with the leading Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate. We'll talk about the latest round of federal charges against ICE protesters, new turmoil surrounding the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis, and Kaomi Lee introduces us to two Anishinaabe artists from White Earth. This all coming up on Almanac.
Almanac is made possible by members of this public television station. Support is also provided by Great River Energy, providing wholesale power to 1.7 million people through its member-owner cooperatives and customers. Delta Dental of Minnesota Foundation, improving oral health and helping communities thrive. deltadentalmn.org/TPT. Education Minnesota, the voice for professional educators and students throughout the state. More at educationminnesota.org. And Vanessa Dayton through the Healthcare for All Minnesotans Fund, supporting accessible healthcare statewide.
Welcome to Almanac. We'll get to the big Democratic U.S. Senate debate in about 15 minutes from now. But we have a couple of other stories for you first, including a look at the latest turmoil surrounding the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis.
And we start tonight with political news near and far. Uncertainty continues in the Middle East on the heels of an agreement between the U.S. and Iran to end the war. Closer to home, 15 people are facing federal conspiracy charges relating to their actions during ICE protests. David Schultz teaches political science at Hamline University. He's also an adjunct law professor at the University of St. Thomas. What led to the deal?
What led to the deal? I think for Trump, it's the elections. I think at the end of the day is that gas prices are going up, and he needed to do something to be able to strike a deal to hopefully be able to prevent the hemorrhaging of gas. For the Iranians, by most accounts, Iran got a pretty good deal out of this. Straits of Hormuz are going to be open, which helps the United States, but Iran still controls them. There's no regime change. They keep their nuclear program. The U.S. lifts the embargo on Iranian oil, and Iran is eligible for up to $300 billion in development funds. For Iran, they got an incredibly good deal. And Republicans and Democrats, I should point out here, are very critical of the deal that Donald Trump negotiated here.
So then do we have any idea about what was achieved at all through the launching of these attacks?
That's partly going to be the judgment for historians, of course, to look at here. But if his goal was to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon or halt their nuclear program, that didn't happen. If it was regime change, that didn't happen either. The big comparison is going to obviously be drawn at this point between the plan, or rather the agreement that the Obama administration had versus Trump. And right now, again, both Democrats and Republicans, a lot of people who are looking at it are saying the Obama deal was probably better than the deal that was struck here.
Could we just buy the nuclear material?
We could if Iran wanted to sell it. But Iran, I think, is also learning something from North Korea. I mean, North Korea basically has multiple nuclear warheads at this point, and it's really bought sort of protection. And I think Iran is basically looking at it saying, if they pursue a nuclear program at this point, they buy a lot of protection for themselves.
So how much of a political liability is this then for the president?
Well, I think the bigger liability is going to be in terms of, the economy. We've seen recent stories about what the inflation rate is still staying high. But for some of his base, where he promised and said no more foreign wars, that may hurt him. But I still think, go back to the old James Carville line, it's always the economy. And I think that's going to be the bigger impact.
Wild card is Israel?
Wild card is really Israel at this point. Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, does not like the deal, and there's all type of speculation that Netanyahu may sabotage it because he needs to basically to be able to continue the war going into his election later this year. So this is fascinating because Israel and the United States are now moving in very, very different directions. And if I remember correctly, Vance has sharply criticized Israel at this point also, too. There's a wedge forming here.
I was just going to ask about the effect on the U.S.-Israeli relationship, which has been a long-standing relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it has been the tightest relationship we've had in the world, next to maybe like England or France or something like that. But it's fracturing.
Federal charges against some of the demonstrators, protesters, the surge in federal court. Can it stand up? Or?
It's going to be tough because we're looking at charges that at best normally would only be misdemeanor, maybe in terms of things. But a lot of the charges here really border on the question of whether or not they're targeting First Amendment free speech or freedom of association activities. Typically, when you bring charges for conspiracy, that's always been a problem, is that the difference between people talking about doing something versus doing something and actually breaking law are very big differences. And historically, the U.S. has brought conspiracy charges oftentimes to go after political movements it does not like.
I wonder how hard it is to prove conspiracy.
Conspiracy is difficult because it's not just, I can talk all I want about saying, I don't like the United States, I want to overthrow the country, I want to do all kinds of nasty things. But until I get to the point where I take some step beyond talk to actually execute that action, and what they're going to have to show here is that this was more than just simply talk. It crossed the line. But also, again, as I pointed out here, generally, that's in the complaint here, is charged as maybe at best misdemeanor.
Thanks for coming over, as always.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to switch gears here. Earlier this month, one Greater Minnesota reporter, Kaomi Lee, went to the White Earth Indian Reservation to meet two Anishinaabe artists. Both credit their grandmothers for inspiring them in their work today.
My name is Kent Esty. My indigenous name is Bimose Nupaming, which means walks along in the woods. I paint a lot about the woods, so I think, that was an appropriate name, spirit name.
The artist is 66 years old and an enrolled tribal member of White Earth Nation.
I live in this beautiful place, this little town called Netawash.
Esty has a deep connection to the place. His family was one of the first to live on the White Earth Reservation.
What I paint today comes from this area, this village of Netawash and its surrounding lakes and trails. But also it's what I want you to see today. Not what I've already seen. You'll see a lot of bright colors and bold colors. I'm not afraid to use a lot of color. I even use fluorescent paint in my work because it's the brightest paint that I can find.
The retired technology teacher was secretly painting for decades, but it's only in the last 10 years has Esty shown his paintings in public.
They come from a family of black ash basket makers. And so I was probably supposed to be a basket maker, and I made baskets my entire life, but it wasn't my thing.
His grandmother, Josephine Robinson, was an acclaimed black ash basket maker. Her work came out of her experiences of forced assimilation at an Indian boarding school. Esty picked up a paintbrush and began painting from photographs with oil and canvas.
As people started to kind of find my work here and there, they would say things like, well, you're a native artist, so could you put something native in that painting? Could you put a teepee in there? If I'm not making baskets like my grandmother and my father and my brothers, if I'm not painting Native American themes, then who am I?
He put his brush down and quit.
And then I found the work of George Morrison.
Morrison's abstract landscapes helped redefine Native American art in the 20th century. The work was fresh and contemporary, and most importantly, it spoke to Esty. He started to paint again, but with acrylics and his hands.
My trees started to look different. The colors in the background of my skies, started to change and get brighter and bold. It wasn't until I started painting what I felt that's when people started noticing.
Esty owns the only art gallery in Netawash. It's a small community of about 500 people. Nearly 36% of residents live in poverty. Statewide, Native Americans are 9 times more likely to die of drug overdose than white folks. Esty wants to tell a different story through art.
We are so much more than the bad news that you hear about our communities. And it seems like reservation communities, that's all you hear is bad news. So I try to tell a story, a positive story about this community. The families that I grew up with and lived in this community their entire lives.
Today, Esty's work can be seen in exhibitions like this one, featuring Indigenous artists at the Textile Center in Minneapolis, among others.
Resiliency also gets passed down. And I hope that's what people see in my work. That's what I want them to feel. I want them to feel this positive energy, this bright energy, this boldness, because that's who we are too as Anishinaabe people.
Kent is kind of a mentor, and he likes to build people up. I do all different kinds of art, but I guess I'm known for doing pottery. The woodland pottery is a traditional art form that dates back thousands and thousands of years.
White Earth descendant Eliza Clare is helping to revive knowledge once lost through assimilation and boarding school eras.
It was more of a utilitarian art form. People would make their drinking cups and boiling pots for sap and parching rice. With woodland pottery, it's entirely hand-built process. We don't have wheels, we don't have kilns, and I think that's one of the things, some of the factors that make it so accessible.
The 26-year-old learned from her late grandmother.
My grandma, Judy Toppings, is the one who revitalized the knowledge. She sought it out and brought it back to life, shared it with her community and her family, and after her passing in 2021, I've continued her work in sharing the traditional art form.
Claire says working with natural materials grounds her.
It's called Gawaba Beganakag, and that stands for the place of white earth, where the earth is white.
She uses straining techniques to sift grass and rocks from the raw clay.
If it's wet, to find out if you're actually looking at clay, you can just roll it into like a snake or a worm, and it'll hold its shape. And you can bend it, and it stays together.
Her signature work at the moment is making turtle smudge pots. She's also involved with the Minoman Arts Initiative that uplifts Native artists and helps them market their work. Claire says it's not an easy path to decide to stay on the reservation and pursue one's art.
The reason why a lot of kids from the res don't return, because they don't have the support.
That's why connections with established artists like Kent Esty are vital, and carrying on her people's lifeways is meaningful.
I feel like my grandma is kind of pulling the strings behind the curtain in a way.
A former Children's Theater Company employee has been indicted on federal child pornography charges. As the news spread this week, it brought up some pretty dark memories of the theater's sex abuse scandal that dates back to the 1970s and 80s. Filmmaker Nora Shapiro chronicled survivor stories in her 2025 documentary, Magic and Monsters. Her son is also a former child actor at the theater, so it had to be a pretty tough week for you.
It's been interesting. I'll put it that way.
You know, the CTC issued a statement after the news came out saying it's kind of apples and oranges. They had safeguards in place. This person didn't really have much in the way of he wasn't really interacting with the actors that much. This is nothing as like the historic abuse was in the past. What do you make of that?
What I make of that is that while the allegations of the alleged crime may be different, but the larger subject and the way it's being handled by the institution, there unfortunately is a common thread. And I learned about this by receiving a screen grab and a text early in the morning from a friend whose daughter was also a child actor at the theater. I had not received that email, never have, nor has my son, nor at this point have many people. So I'm not sure how they decided who stakeholders are. But the point is that what I see as a repeat, whether or not the specifics are apples or oranges, is the way in which it's the reputation of the institution, liability, reputation, whose interests are really being addressed up front and center.
And that informs the quote, the mechanics of not seeing, that I saw you quoted as saying this week?
I don't remember if I exactly said that, but certainly that's in the vicinity of what we're talking about.
It has to be very difficult for the adult survivors to see something like this in the news.
Yes, and what I can say is that I did reach out to several of the subjects who were in the film, subject participants in the film who were former child actors, and they were also litigants. Just to let them know, I felt obligated, since I knew this, and to very carefully reach out and let them know this is happening, and inquired had they already known about this, and they did not. They have not been contacted, to my knowledge, by the theater. And of course, how could it not be triggering?
There are several moving parts here, and I wonder what your recommendations would be to the theater, to the news media, to law enforcement.
That's a great question. I think I'm going to take those in reverse. I mean, law enforcement at this juncture is very different than what it was in the early days of what happened in the 70s and 80s. And I think, for the most part, they know what they're doing, and they have experts, and they just need to keep doing it. And that involves having trauma-informed practices when children are involved. I don't really know any details of this investigation. I do know the individual because he was directly interacting with my son and with many children. Beyond that, I don't know anything. Media, this is a subject that it's so easy to look away from. I commend Almanac. This is my second time here at this table talking with you guys, or maybe the couch. And rather than looking away, this has to be talked about and looked at. And as far as the theater, I mean, that's a hard one for me to start with. I would start with, if my recommendation carried any weight, it is maybe think about the children and the former children. Who are your stakeholders, and what is your job? Are you protecting your reputation, or are you really genuinely reckoning with what happened in the past, what may have happened more recently, and what is the common thread in there? That's, I guess, my answer to that.
In the wake of this story, you are streaming on kinema.com, Kinema, kinema.com, Magic and Monsters. Why? So we are, without getting into all the just briefly
sob story or the story of distribution, the world of distribution, we are just about a year out of premiering the film. We're still doing some festival screening, working out our distribution, but in light of these events and this important history and understanding the issue and the demand, we just thought we would make it for a brief time available.
All right. Nora, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a
Appreciate
pleasure
it.
to be here. Thank you.
Well, Eric and I are going to head over to the couch where our Democratic U.S. Senate debate will begin in less than 30 seconds. We'll be right back. Now, for the rest of the hour, we will have a debate with the Democratic candidates for the U.S. Senate. The
primary less than 2 months away. This is the first debate in the race, and we've invited those who we believe to be the two leading candidates to join us in studio tonight. The format will be typical for an Almanac debate. No timed responses, no opening statements, no podiums or stopwatches, no forced formality. The goal, frankly, is a conversation.
Spirited conversation. The candidates joining us tonight in alphabetical order. U.S. Representative Angie Craig has represented Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District since 2019. Just days before last month's statewide DFL convention, Craig decided not to seek the party's endorsement. Peggy Flanagan is Minnesota's lieutenant governor, a job she has held since 2019 after serving in the state legislature. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan received the party endorsement last month by acclamation. Good to have you both here. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Let's dive right in to a controversial subject, immigration. Representative Craig, you wrote an op-ed piece in the Star Tribune about the vote you took on I'm going to call it the Trump immigration bill, just for purposes here. And you wrote it in March, which was 3 months after 2 Minnesotans were shot and killed by federal agents. And I'm curious as to why it took you so long to publicly walk back that vote.
Well, look, the administration, they weren't using that particular bill to do what they did in Minnesota. People know this administration, they were following no laws. But as I stood and watched what happened in Minnesota with Operation Metro Surge,
which started in December,
the killing of Renee Good, the killing of Alex Preddy, as I stood at the Whipple Center, I couldn't help but regret giving this administration any additional authority under immigration. And so I felt like I needed to be honest with Minnesotans that I did regret that vote. I've worked tirelessly on comprehensive immigration reform as a member of Congress, including our nation's dreamers and folks who are here undocumented, making sure that they have a path to documentation and legal status.
As you say, you've worked in immigration. I apologize if I missed it, but I don't know if I've seen a solid explanation from you as to why you took the vote in the first place.
Well, at the time, you recall, it was 3 days in to the new administration. And this particular bill was a bill that would allow immigration officials to detain, not deport, as my opponent here, the lieutenant governor, has suggested, individuals who committed certain crimes. At the time, it felt like, other senators like John Ossoff, Raphael Warnock, Mark Kelly, Ruben Gallego also voted for this bill. But as I saw what they did, and as I've stood up to this administration to impeach Kristi Noem through introducing articles of impeachment, as I've seen what they've done in detention centers across this country, I have to be honest with the people that I represent. I regret the vote.
Your thoughts on dismantle ICE or get rid of it? Or?
Well, I'd say a couple things. First of all, I think it's important to say that what the Laken-Riley Act does, or what you call Trump's immigration bill, which I think is appropriate, it allows for indefinite detention of individuals, including children. It essentially does away with due process for immigrants. And I think the thing that's really important to note here is that every other Minnesota Democrat voted no on the Laken-Riley Act. Amy Klobuchar, Senator Tina Smith, Kelly Morrison, Betty McCollum, Ilhan Omar, they all knew what was coming, and they had the judgment to vote no.
You have a reform plan?
Well, let me also say this. I think this is important because this is a really critical piece of this race. As you mentioned, the Congresswoman stood by this vote for a long time, including when ICE was in the streets terrorizing Minnesotans. She didn't regret the vote during the height of Operation Metro Surge, including the day after Alex Preddy was killed. She was on television. She was asked if she regretted her vote. She stood by it and said no. And so here's the deal. I think we deserve a United States Senator who's going to stand with the people of Minnesota, who's going to use appropriate judgment. And, I don't think this was a secret. Donald Trump was very clear what he was going to do. Signs that said mass deportation now, that was his agenda. It didn't sneak up on anybody. And the first vote out of the second Trump administration, 3 days in, we needed someone who was going to stand up to Trump, not bend to his agenda.
Okay. Real quick.
I would simply say that I have been fighting back every day as a member of Congress. I voted against any funding for ICE. I've introduced articles of impeachment from Kristi Noem. Thank goodness she is gone. And at the end of the day, I find it really ironic because all of what the lieutenant governor is saying, she was out soliciting while she was the chair of the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association money for a company that runs ICE detention centers across this country.
Is that true?
For Civic.
That's not true. That's absolutely not true. And let's be clear. The DLGA, the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association, is a committee of the Democratic Party. It is made up of lieutenant governors who are 88% are women or people of color.
You chaired it at the time, right? You were the chair.
I was the chair.
When the money came in from Core Civic,
I did not solicit that money, and I told the DLGA that they should return it. But
Not
if we
at
want
the
to talk
time,
about
after you're running for the Senate.
If we want to talk about corporate special interests, and if we want to talk about corporations getting engaged and involved in this, in this election, I think we should, because Congresswoman Craig has taken more corporate PAC money throughout her career because these corporate PACs understand that she's going to do their bidding, and we've seen it example after example after example.
I think we should ban all corporate PAC money in America. I think we should ban super PACs in America. In fact, I've introduced legislation that would end Citizens United and stop what our constituents are having to face with in every single election cycle. But what the lieutenant governor is not saying, and you can go and check the FEC records. The money that came from the ICE detention center that now they're going to run one in Appleton, Minnesota, was received while she was chair of the DLGA. She didn't reject the money while she was chair. And by the way, the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association, they have now stood up a super PAC that has been attacking me since January. Well, it's the money she raised that is now coming into this Senate race. And so, you're providing a purity test that you can't pass. And at the end of the day, when you talk about PAC money, you've been out raising it, and now the same organization is spending it on your behalf.
Speaking of money, let's talk about fraud, Eric. Do you have a question about fraud?
Well, I think I'd like to respond to that.
Could you do it in like 30 seconds?
I can, which is to say this. Corporations, corporate PACs, give Congresswoman Craig money because they know that she will do their bidding, including the cryptocurrency industry, which, she voted for their dream bill right out of the gate, which has allowed Donald Trump to enrich himself to the tune of billions of dollars. She's supported by the health insurance companies who are blocking Medicare for all. I'm for it. And she has voted with Donald Trump more than any other Minnesota Democrat.
Real quick.
30 seconds. The lieutenant governor literally raised money from big oil, big tobacco, and big pharma, and an ICE detention center contractor. You can pretend none of this happened because now you're running for the United States Senate, and that might be fine, except the DLGA is actually the group that is running your super PAC.
Okay.
I want to talk about fraud, though.
Well, let's talk about welfare fraud in Minnesota. You and the governor were seen as a partner, strong partnership. He was out running for vice president. What did you know about the fraud, the old Watergate question, and when did you know it?
Well, I want to be really clear that, Minnesotans are angry about fraud. I'm angry too. The governor says that the buck stops with him, and he took the lead here. I took the lead on issues like paid family and medical leave, housing and homelessness. And I think as we're talking about, fraud in this election, that it's very clear to me that Republicans are also going to have to answer to, questions about fraud. Michelle Tafoya, Adam Schwartzy, whoever my opponent is this fall. There's rampant corruption that's happening in Washington, D.C., and they're going to have to answer to that.
Did you ever have a conversation with the governor or cabinet members that there's something fishy going on in these programs and somebody should just step forward?
You are the governor in waiting, right? And you're supposed to know what's going on.
And the governor and the legislature have taken action. There has been legislation that has passed to stop fraud, to prevent it from happening in the first place. This Office of Inspector General that was just passed in this legislative session is incredibly important.
But some would say that the horse has been out of the barn and running down the road now for quite some time before all this happened.
And I would say this, that action has been taken, and that work will continue. I believe under Governor Klobuchar, frankly, I like her chances. She has a strong agenda that she is also moving. But this, I think what is very clear is that Republicans are going to run against everyone on fraud. They're bringing it up for Amy Klobuchar. They're bringing it up for Congresswoman Craig, who, frankly, J.D. Vance just attacked her, last week.
What kind of fraud might you have to deal with?
As the ranking member of the House Ag Committee, SNAP benefits come through your committee, and I assume there's been fraud there.
Well, we had Brooke Rollins in front of the committee the other day. SNAP has one of the lowest fraud rates in the country, and when she tried to bring it, I snapped back right at her. Look, at the end of the day, any amount of fraud in Minnesota is too much. And in fact, 3 years ago, I introduced legislation that would increase the criminal and civil penalties for anyone who stole from a federal program. 3 years ago, I introduced that same legislation that would have third-party auditors who would look at these programs. But I'm actually stunned. We were talking about accountability a moment ago, and I take accountability for what I do as a member of Congress. It's still stunning to me that the lieutenant governor continues to shift every bit of the blame to the governor for the fraud that has occurred in Minnesota. And we see every Friday night you have Republicans who sit on this couch and they say out loud, we want to run against Peggy Flanagan, not Angie Craig, because we believe this is a major vulnerability of Peggy Flanagan in this race. And the Star Tribune just did a story this week that demonstrated 81% of Minnesotans are very concerned about fraud. Republicans are going to have a field day if the lieutenant governor is at the top of the ticket.
So I think what's really interesting about that is just last week, Congresswoman Craig said that Governor Tim Walz, Attorney General Ellison, the attacks that were coming from Republicans, she called, and I quote, Republican political theater. And I think what's so interesting about that is the fact that, again, Congresswoman Craig is using Republican talking points, which I think is probably where she is most comfortable as the, Minnesota Democrat who votes more with Donald Trump than anyone else, has bragged on her website that she votes with Tom Emmer 45% of the time. I think what Minnesotans are actually interested in is, a U.S. senator who is going to work on behalf of Minnesotans, not bend to Republicans or be a MAGA Democrat.
Thank you for opening the door to this question, because I think we could now talk about political style and philosophy, because both of you come from different wings of the DFL party. Congresswoman Craig, you've been called a centrist, that you meet Republicans in the middle, but you've also been called a dino, Democrat in name only. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, you're farther to the left. You've been endorsed by Bernie Sanders. You've been called a Democratic Socialist. And I'm wondering, Representative Craig, what about the Lieutenant Governor's style and philosophy gives you pause?
Well, I've also had ads run against me in every election by Republicans who've spent $50 million trying to take my seat, saying that I vote with Nancy Pelosi 97% of the time. Look, I like the Lieutenant Governor personally. I simply believe that after 8 years in the House, after voting to impeach Donald Trump 2 times, after taking it to my Republican colleagues, as well as passing 13 bills into law.
But what about Lieutenant Governor that might you look at her governing style or her philosophy? What gives you pause?
So we can't stop Donald Trump and Republicans unless we win elections. The Lieutenant Governor has never faced a competitive race on the ballot by herself, not in her entire political career. Michelle Tafoya is going to be the candidate on the other side of whoever wins. She is going to be the candidate. She's one of the best candidates they have fielded in 20 years. Fraud is the #1 issue. Do we really want someone who has served as the number 2 in the state government, who takes no responsibility or accountability for anything that was happening under her watch, even while the governor was running for vice president as our candidate.
And would you like to maybe look at the Congresswoman's philosophy and style and what gives you pause?
Well, I'd say this. I think that one of the reasons why we're here is because too many Democrats have been weak, nibbling around the edges, bending to Republicans or fighting from a defensive crouch. We've done over 250 events. I've done those personally all across the state of Minnesota. And what people tell me is that they want folks who are going to be bold. They want people who are going to fight for things like Medicare for all. They want folks who are going to fight to make sure that people can afford the lives they want to live. They want to increase the federal minimum wage. They want things like universal child care.
You're saying you're a fighter.
Yes. And I'm saying this.
The electability issue, where are you on that?
I've been leading in most every poll that we've had, so I like my chances. But I'd also say this. I'm someone who has, served at the local level, at the state level, in the legislature, also as lieutenant governor. But the through line through all of that is I am very clear that my job is to make sure that I am making life more affordable for people in Minnesota. And I'm endorsed, of course, by the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. I am a DFLer and a DFLer to my core. I've been endorsed by Senator Tina Smith, who currently holds the seat.
That's right.
8 sitting U.S. senators. And the most important endorsement, I think, is the, votes of folks across Minnesota where we're doing this work.
So when you say that you want to fight, that there are some of the folks who want, you have to get things done, though. Right?
Yeah.
And if you're fighting, aren't you digging the political divide even deeper?
I think here's what I know. When we talk about the choice in this election, I think the choice is between an institutional corporate Democrat who's been a Washington insider and a progressive champion who's ready to push and get things done. I am very clear that things like crypto, for example, which, we talked about just a moment ago, on the very first day of the Minnesota State Fair, Congresswoman Craig was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming at a resort headlining a crypto conference as the only Democrat who was there, which was the warm-up act for Eric Trump.
Yeah, well, that wasn't true at all. And I'm the head of the House Committee on Agriculture, which has authority over the CFTC, and that is why I was there in my official capacity. But let's go back to...
But they spent $1 million in your congressional race.
The Lieutenant Governor was talking about as it relates to her experience. Look, I have passed 13 bills since I've been a member of Congress. I believe you have to know when to throw a punch, as Nancy Pelosi says, for the children. And I believe you have to know when to reach across the aisle and get something done. I actually think people are most upset with Democrats because we use a lot of rhetoric that fires them up at a campaign rally, but we actually don't accomplish anything. I'm proud of my bill that capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for our seniors, Narcan available over the counter, Medicare finally being able to negotiate its drug pricing. I know how to fight, but I also know how to get things done. And I think that is why people are truly mad at the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and why Donald Trump came back to office.
Let's talk about Israel. Do you have different views on Netanyahu's government there, or what's your stance on Israel and what we should be doing going forward?
My stance is that I believe that Benjamin Netanyahu has far too much power over what happens.
Professor Schultz said they're a wild card in the Iran negotiations.
I think that's right. I don't take AIPAC money because my values don't align with AIPAC. AIPAC is, I believe, an entity that is moved even further towards being primarily responsible for moving Benjamin Netanyahu's, agenda. And this is another place where Congressman Craig and I differ. There's a article that came out in MinnPost that says she's received $1 million so far from AIPAC. I think that's a significant difference. I believe, of course, in a two-state solution. I believe that what's happened to the people of Gaza is horrific, that the people of Israel, the children of Israel, deserve to live in peace. Palestinians deserve the right to self-determination, but that we need to use the tools in our toolbox, to allow humanitarian aid to get into Gaza, and that includes blocking offensive weapons from Benjamin Netanyahu's government.
Congresswoman.
Well, the numbers she just threw out are absolutely ridiculous. AIPAC has not contributed at all, the PAC, to my Senate campaign, not one penny. And what the Lieutenant Governor said, I agree that Benjamin Netanyahu, the best thing that can happen for Middle East peace is Benjamin Netanyahu loses his election in October. I have voted against the war in Iran 4 times. And at the end of the day, we want Israelis and we want Palestinians, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in the West Bank, to be able to live in peace with the security and not terrorism around them. And so, at the end of the day, I do believe that this administration has probably made one of the biggest foreign policy blunders in the history of the United States by proactively attacking Iran. We are in such a worse position than we were the day that we went into that war. And so I think that's going to keep coming back to haunt us. Iran is going to get $300 billion. That is going to allow them to fund terrorism in Gaza, Hamas or Hezbollah in Lebanon. But at the end of the day, the international community has got to band together to help rebuild Gaza, ensure that Palestinians in Gaza have the humanitarian support that they need. And those are the things that I've been working on as a member of Congress.
And I think it's important, though, to note, I want to tell you what's going on here. Congresswoman Craig just said that, she's taken no AIPAC PAC money, but they've held over a dozen fundraisers for her, including one at the home of the head of AIPAC in this election specifically for the Senate, because they understand who their candidate is in this race. AIPAC's candidate is Angie Craig.
Would you like to refute that?
That is completely untrue, and I will just say it's a real shame. But we should be talking about policy.
Has AIPAC ever given you money in terms of your House races?
You know what? This is a great conversation because I don't believe Democrats, even though we should ban PAC money, it's like gerrymandering. We can't tie one hand behind our back. Of course, individuals who support AIPAC, pro-Israel Democrats, have also supported me. I'm sure pro-Israel Democrats have also supported the Lieutenant Governor over the years. I don't go through my finance report and try to figure out who supports an organization like Planned Parenthood and Angie Craig or any other organization. I do want to come back, though, since the Lieutenant Governor has been able to do this a couple of times. She mentioned a number of endorsements. Of course, I have a number of endorsements from a number of U.S. senators as well. What I would say, though, is what the most important endorsements to me are the people that I've worked with over the last 8 years who know me the best, Hakeem Jeffries and Nancy Pelosi. We have accomplished a lot. The person who she has worked with most closely over the last 8 years is Tim Walz. And Tim Walz has not endorsed the Lieutenant Governor in this race. And so I would simply ask the people we work with, are they supporting us?
So I'd say a couple things. One, I'm incredibly proud of the work that Governor Walz and I have done together, passing paid family and leave, national leading child tax credit, breakfast and lunch for children at school. And, Governor Walz was clear very early on in this race that he was going to be neutral, and I appreciate that. But this campaign, as folks have been used to Tim and Peggy and the Walz-Flanagan administration, this campaign is about Peggy Flanagan for the U.S. Senate. We've done that work. We've traveled across the state. I've earned the DFL party endorsement, which to me is deeply meaningful, and the majority of DFL legislators. But again, this question, I think, is about, who Democrats want to send to the U.S. Senate. Having the party backing and the endorsement, I think, is powerful. But the choice is between, right, a corporate Democrat and someone who has voted with Donald Trump more than any other Minnesota Democrat, and someone who's been a DFLer and progressive champion.
Can I just remind everyone that when I first ran for Congress, I stepped off the sidelines of a company that I'd worked with for 12 years to take back a seat that had been in Republican hands for 3/4 of a century. Nobody thought that any Democrat could win the 2nd District of Minnesota. And to be fair, they really didn't think a lesbian mother of 4 could win the 2nd District of Minnesota. And so I am so proud to have made the decision when I was 44 years old to, for the first time, to get involved in politics. The Lieutenant Governor's right. I haven't been involved in politics for 30 years, like she and many others in this state have. I got off the sidelines because Donald Trump came into office. And sure, I will work with anyone who wants to get things done for the people of Minnesota, but I also know how to fight these people.
Speaking of a big issue for the people of Minnesota, actually people across the country, of course, Social Security. A lot of people are watching that are pretty concerned about that, a lot of constituents. Evidently, there could be a 22% cut in benefits coming down the pike by 2032 if Congress doesn't do anything to shore this up. So if you get to the Senate, what would you do to shore up Social Security? Is it a matter of raising the retirement age, raising taxes?
I'm a big supporter of the Social Security Expansion Act, and I think that that's something that we have to get done to allow for the solvency of Social Security into the future. Because one of the things that I hear all the time, including from people my age and younger, is that Social Security isn't going to be there for us, right? Not with that attitude, it isn't, right? And so I think we have to be very clear that this is something that people have earned, and that it needs to be there for future generations. This is an incredibly important policy, I think, and especially as we're watching what's happening with this economy under Donald Trump, shoring up Social Security, not privatizing it, and making sure that it's there for future generations is incredibly important.
Okay.
I support the bill as a member of Congress that the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, but I also have my own bill. And I introduced it about 3 years ago. We've been working on support. It would actually allow seniors to stop paying federal taxes on their Social Security income. How we do that is we eliminate the cap. If you're wealthy and you have the good fortune of making more than $186,000 a year, you should keep paying into Social Security. It would actually extend the life, according to the CBO of the trust fund, by 34 years, and it would pay down the national debt by $9 trillion over 7 decades. So this is something that I've been working on as a member of Congress. I'm so passionate about it. I have the good fortune of my grandmother still being alive at 99 years old. And she lives on just over $600 a month in Social Security income. So this has been a really big passion of mine as a member.
Is this quote correct? You said about the campaign, it's going to get ugly, it's going to be gross. Do you remember saying that?
I do.
I wonder if I'm a Democrat at home or an independent or a moderate Republican, and I'm thinking, boy, these two are really going at it. I wonder if DFL unity is in the balance here after the primary. Is this good for the party?
I think it's great for the party. There is no shame in having two women who have been successful in their own right, Peggy in the state, me at the national level, fending off and defending a seat that literally helped bring us the majority in 2018, having a spirited competition. In fact, that's good. It makes us both better for the general election. And make no mistake about it, Michelle Tafoya is going to be quite the battle. And look, my internal polling, Lieutenant Governor mentioned polling a few minutes ago. The only external polling we have from KSTP currently shows me up 5 percentage points in this race. This came out earlier this week. But our internal polling shows with one hit on the Lieutenant Governor on fraud, she is tied with Michelle Tafoya. I am beating Michelle Tafoya in our internal polling by 7 percentage points. Going back to Everybody is saying fraud is one of the number one issues this election cycle. Republicans want to run against the lieutenant governor. They say that on your couch every week. We can't give Republicans
I'm not sure they've said that. I'm not sure I remember them saying that.
Pat Garofalo has.
Okay.
I'll see,
I bet you've got internal polling that shows something different.
We certainly do have internal polling that shows something different. Our latest internal poll that we released just last week shows that we're up by 17 points, shows that our favorables are higher than Congresswoman Craig's, and that we are both formidable when it comes to taking on Michelle Tafoya or Adam Schwartzy. And so, what I would also say, and what I meant by that, Eric, is, we certainly can have a spirited debate, but when we have AI deep fake ads that are coming out that are, paid for by super PACs in support of Congresswoman Craig.
And that was a pretty recent thing.
It was a very recent thing that happened. And, I don't think that AI deepfakes have any place in our politics. Right now, we are in a position where trust in public institutions, what Donald Trump and his MAGA Republican buddies have done to this country, we can't lean into that, right? We have to do everything we can, again, to run on our records, to run on policy debates. But the thing that was most troubling to me about that ad was when my child saw it. When my 13-year-old daughter saw this version of her mom in this ad that was spewing things that were not true. We are better than that, and we have to make commitments that there is no place for AI deepfakes in our policies, and they should be denounced.
Did you reach out to any individuals who...
I'm not allowed to by law. It is a super PAC, an independent expenditure committee. I did say publicly, though, through the press, that if it is indeed AI, they should take it down. In fact, I co-sponsor a bill right now that would ban AI in political ads. What's interesting, though, is that the lieutenant governor mostly focused on the AI in the ad. She still hasn't really addressed what that ad said, which is that she raised money for the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association from corporations and corporate PACs. She hasn't addressed whether she did that or not, and she still hasn't addressed that here on our show. Your show this
take the opportunity.
I think I did address it, but I will also say this again: corporate PACs, corporate special interests, have contributed tremendous amounts to Congresswoman Craig, to her individual campaigns over the history of her entire political career. Health insurance companies who are blocking Medicare for All, which Minnesotans and folks across this country want, I support it. The cryptocurrency industry, which is funding Congresswoman Craig, she is their champion. There's actually an NFT with her face on it that calls her a crypto champion because they know that she will do their bidding. John Deere has spent tens of thousands of dollars supporting Congresswoman Craig in her congressional work, and I support right to repair. There is a big difference between the two of us, and it's that Congresswoman Craig does the bidding of corporate special interests.
I would just note that the lieutenant governor did not answer the question of whether she's raised that money or not. So she can't pass the purity test that she is putting to me. I used the money I raised as a House member to beat the hell out of every Republican opponent that came in front
there
of
is
me.
clearly a wide gulf between you two as candidates. But I'm wondering, is there anything about the other candidate that you'd like to say, anything good about your opponent?
I would.
Would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'd love to go first. Look, I think Peggy's personal story and my personal story are very similar. And our mothers sound very similar as well. Her advocacy for free and reduced, for free lunch, shame-free lunch for kids in Minnesota is notable and laudable, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Like to say anything nice?
I would say this. I think Congresswoman Craig has been a leader when it comes to Congress meeting their commitment to fund IDEA or special education at 40%. I share that philosophy, and I think that that's something that's personal to her as well, and I appreciate her work there. I would just say, though, the best way to get rid of End Citizens United, which I am endorsed by End Citizens United, is to model that we can run strong grassroots campaigns without taking corporate PAC money and win.
We need to end it there. We appreciate both of you being here for the first debate between both of you. You have a Farm Fest debate and some other things coming down the pipe.
We do.
Mm-hmm. We need more real debates. So
thank you so much. Appreciate this.
Thank you.
Quick note, if you're interested in hearing from Republican U.S. Senate candidates or primary candidates in the governor's race, stay tuned. We'll be highlighting those races in the weeks to come. Thank you so much for watching this special edition of Almanac. We'll see you again next week.
Almanac is made possible by members of this public television station. Support is also provided by Great River Energy, providing wholesale power to 1.7 million people through its member-owner cooperatives and customers. Delta Dental of Minnesota Foundation, improving oral health and helping communities thrive. deltadentalmn.org/TPT. Education Minnesota, the voice for professional educators and students throughout the state. More at educationminnesota.org. And Vanessa Dayton through the Healthcare for All Minnesotans Fund, supporting accessible healthcare statewide. Almanac is a production of Twin Cities PBS for the stations of Minnesota Public Television Association.